Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. My name is Dan Sissick, and I'm going to be the host this week because Samantha, she is out and has something else that's going on this weekend. I know she told us, but I can't exactly remember what. Um, but I have my awesome and wonderful friend Catherine here with me to help me as we discussed the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. Here's a copy of the book. I just got mine, and we're on chapter 3. And so before we get started, I'm going to let Catherine introduce herself, and if she feels like it, tell us a little bit about herself, and then we'll get started.
Good morning. This is Catherine in Boulder, Colorado. Samantha's at a breast cancer awareness walk this morning, I think.
That's right. You're right. You are right. Now that you say that, I am remembering that. And thank you. And I'm Dan Sissick. I'm here in sunny Las Vegas right now, where we're getting up into the 90s. I'm loving it because I love the hotter weather. So this is perfect for me. So getting ready. We're getting into chapter 3 in the book of Atomic Habits by James Clear, as I just showed you. Sorry. And how to build better habits in 4 simple steps. Now, as I was reading through this chapter, and in the beginning it talks about in 1898, a psychologist named Edward Thorndike con- conducted an experiment that would lay the foundation for the understanding of how habits form and the rules that guide our behavior. And Thorndike was very interested in this, and he used the studying of animals and their behaviors and how their thought processes are formed and kind of how they go through and learn things, which um, assuming is at a semi lower level in some ways, and in other ways higher levels than humans, um, for how they learn and do things, because a lot of what they do is by habit and by uh, going over and doing the same things, just a lot like we do as humans. And he started off with cats, and he put them in a puzzle box, and he did different things and had different things set up to where they might be able to escape out a door if they pushed on a lever, or they might get some treat or reward if they went over to a certain spot or stuff. And he went through several different types of for periods of time, and realized that, sorry, I'm at a friend's house, dog sitting. They heard something and now they're out after whatever they heard. But he realized that by some simple act, such as pulling at a loop of cord, pressing a lever, or stepping on a platform, they would realize that they could do this. But sometimes when they first get in, just like we do, um, we tend to test the water, so to speak. We try to see, navigate, and find our way, and see where what will work and what doesn't work. And after a while, they would learn the things, and each time they did it, they got faster and faster and faster, kind of like we do as humans. Um, when we're in the middle of something and learning something and new processes, when we first do it, we're kind of slower. We're processing it. We're going through the steps of how to um, process it and learn the steps that are needed to take to get to the result and the reward that we're looking for. And like anything, he said most of the cats wanted to try and get out of there as quickly as they could because it was not an area that's familiar to them. So I think we tend to kind of do that when we get in new waters. We want to either, you know, get out, find a resolution, or whatever. Um, but he tracked the behavior of all the cats, and learned that each time they did it, they got a little bit faster. But what got me was, like he said, he took the 12 cats, and Uh, first they started like 160 seconds, then went way down to 30 seconds, then back up to 90, then 60, then 15, then 28. So it seemed like it was a up, down, but each time it was up. It would take a long time, then they get a little faster, then they take a little bit of time, and then faster, and down to where they got down to where on average is about 6 or 7 seconds, and they were down and out and able to move on. Now, if you have anything to add or throw out, Catherine, please do. Um, the other, and then he said why our brains builds habits, and this was something that kind of really came out to me. And he said a habit is a behavior that has been repeated enough times to become automatic. And if you think about it, we all go through that. We all, like our morning routines. We all probably have morning routines. When we get up, we do this, we do, and we don't even think about it. We just kind of go through and do it and stuff. Um, I'm forever saying when I'm driving to my brain and my car seem to just know I get there and I arrive, and sometimes I don't realize that I've gotten there because I'm still kind of in that automatic process. Begins with trial and error. Whenever you, like I said before, whenever you encounter a new situation in life, your brain has to make a decision. How do I respond to this? And as I stated before, the first time you come across it, you're not sure, so you try and pick and choose and try things to go through. Um, but he says that um, this develops into doing it as we go through and do this. We develop kind of like a feedback loop, um, where our once we start learning these things, and as we get more and more through the process, and we learn the steps, it becomes more and more automatic in our brain. We just kind of go through. So therefore, it's like a feedback. It constantly plays whenever we come to that situation. Our brain kicks in and says, "Oh, okay, we're here. Let me start this track." Kind of like when you hear about music playback loops, where you can create a loop or a soundtrack or something, and it's on a continuous loop throughout the period of the song. So that way you hear the same bits and pieces throughout the whole song, but it's not having to be uh, acted out each and every time. They put it on a track or recorded or digital. Now a lot of it's done digitally, but they have it all there, and it's just set to repeat constantly, so it's on a loop. So that's kind of what he um, was talking about. And but we also go through that, and a lot of times we go and base these decisions on whether it's good or bad. If it's And a lot of habits are built upon our responses to, oh, this feels good, let me continue on. And um and then he says, whenever you face a problem repeatedly, brain begins to automate that process, as I've said earlier. And your habits are just a series of automatic solutions that solve the problems and stresses you face regularly. And in this, it was interesting to note that the reason why we do develop habits is because he says that our active conscious can only focus on one thing at a time. So with everything going on and all the distractions out there in life, um, our brain has to throw some things back to our subconscious mind so it can handle those things that are of not are less importance but still need to be done. And I'm sure you know that feeling, Catherine, when you've been out Ubering, as I do, because I do that part time. Some of what we do is automatic. I have certain places I go, certain areas I drive, things I do, and I kind of just go there just automatic while I'm trying to pay attention to if a fare comes up on my phone that I need to go to, and then I need to pay attention to where I've got to drive to pick them up and stuff. But other things is when I'm turning at a corner and I have to turn, I kind of just automatically turn the blinker on, this, that, the other thing. Um, wouldn't you say that's kind of, do you agree with that? Or do you feel that, that he's right with, that we do tend to do a lot of things subconsciously that have become the things that we just habitually do?
Absolutely. I think we all do, you know, we can have good habits and we can have bad habits. And I think we just do them without thinking. One of the things that he brings up is just, simply having coffee in the morning. If you're a coffee drinker, one of the first things you do when you get up in the morning is get the coffee going, and you really don't feel like you're waking up good or that your day's really started until you get your coffee going. So it's, I think it's easy to develop bad habits easier than it is to develop good habits. Um, you can One of the things that he talks about, and he's got a whole there's steps to it and everything. I have the Audible book, and although I enjoy having someone read the book to me, it's I prefer the Kindle or to have it in paper so that I can refer back to certain passages. I'm sure Audible lets you do that. I just haven't figured out how to use it correctly yet. But he talks about how there's different ways to develop a habit or to change a habit. And one of them was, because let's just say you want to quit, I'll use smoking for an instance because he used that. Um, let's just say you want to quit smoking because you want to be healthier. Um, he said if you go about trying to change a habit just for the outcome, it's not as successful. It's harder to change. But if you try to change a habit by changing who you are, in other words, saying, I'm not a smoker, telling yourself, I'm not a smoker, then it's easier. And I totally agree with that. Um, that's one of the big, I'm not cutting down on AA or anything. And I have friends that have used that program and have been sober for 25 years now. So obviously it's a good program. But when I heard about that program because of my friend and I explored it a little bit, one of the problems I always had with it is that, they teach them forevermore to say I'm an alcoholic. And I'm like, why are you claiming something that you don't want? Like they need to be saying I'm not an alcoholic or I'm not a drinker or something, that coincides with actually what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, I get it. Like once an addict, always an addict, they say, but now we're learning the importance of words and the importance of intention and that how important what we say to ourselves is. And if you're always telling yourself you're an alcoholic, then I think that would have to keep you stuck in a certain place. Like I've started smoking cigarettes at a very early age, and um, I smoked all throughout my teen years, and then when I got pregnant, I stopped, and then when I was a nurse, I pretty much stopped that whole time. So there was a long period of time that I didn't smoke. Then I wound up getting really, really stressed. I went back, then I quit, then I went back, then I quit. So, and now because I drive for a living, what I used to do when I drove was smoke. That's what I did. And so it's a challenge for me every day. And every day I have to tell myself I am not a smoker. And that's how I keep away from that bad habit, even though it tempts me every day. Like I have to tell myself the the things that I don't like about, I remind myself why I'm not a smoker and all the things that I dislike about it and stuff. And so I think it's super important um, to, if you're trying to change your habits or develop new habits, to incorporate it into a self image that corresponds.
I agree, and that takes me back to where he says, despite their efficiency, some people still wonder about the benefits of habits, and I've seen myself do this. You know, the argument goes like this: Well, habits make my life dull. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into a lifestyle I don't enjoy. Doesn't so much routine take away the vibrancy and spontaneity of life? And I've found myself doing that. And I think that goes back into how we, like you said, what we say to ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. And how often do you, I've said it, I said, well, I'm not this or I'm not that, but in our brain, does that connect? And does that really play out in how we, make the choices in our habits? And then he goes on into, oh, well, let me go to this other point. And it's interesting because as I started reading this chapter and getting into this book, um, we've studied and gone through the slide edge. Do little continuous things build good habits, but I don't think he got into the real science. And so this is helping me understand the science and the behind the scenes stuff that goes on to help make those choices, to do those little steps every day, to build those good habits, and the reason why I want to do that. And so now having that book along with this book, I can put the two together and say, oh, okay, now to me, I think I'll have better results and changing some of the habits I want to change, and ultimately getting rid of some of the bad habits I have and replacing them with new ones. And in the section that I'm looking at right now, he goes, the science of how habits work. He says the process of building a habit can be divided into four simple steps. I didn't realize this. I didn't realize that they were just four simple steps. I thought it was some big drawn out thing that we go through, but he says basically it's cue, craving, response, and reward. And breaking it down into these fundamental parts can help us understand what a habit is, how it works, and how to improve it. And so, first, the cue is there's the cue. The cue triggers your brain to initiate a behavior. It is a bit of information that predicts a reward. Our prehistoric ancestors were paying attention to cues that signal the location of primary rewards like food, water, and sex. Today, we spend most of our time learning cues that predict secondary rewards like money, fame, power, and stuff like that. And how often have we, and I think habits also partly get put into us to develop by our surroundings, our environment, by our family. Because a lot of times, guys will get told to, go out, work hard, find a good career, like, you know, um, and it's general, you can or lawyer or this or that. Women are told to go out and be teachers or this or that, or find a good man and so you get kind of. I think that's another area that kind of pushes us into the decisions and the habits that we form over time too. Um, and your mind is continuously analyzing your internal external environment for hints of where rewards are located. And because the cue is first indication that we're close to reward, it naturally leads to a craving. And then the cravings are the second step. They are the motivational force behind every habit. Without some level of motivation or desire, without craving a change, we have no reason to act. What you crave is not the habit itself, but the change in state it delivers. And I think you'll agree with me, Catherine. We all have things that we desire and want and desire to change or attain and stuff, but sometimes we don't get through that full process. And later on, he talks a little bit about that, and I'll get that to in a minute. And what you crave is you do not crave smoking a cigarette. You crave the feeling of relief it provides. Um, and you spoke about that for you, like a lot of things are born out of stress. And I think that, like, even my mom, she smoked for a lot of years when she was younger, then quit for 17 years. What made it so that she would quit for 17 years and then something happened and she started smoking again? Well, I know partially through some stress factors in her life dealing with my one brother who has mental issues. That was the thing that kind of pushed her back in. before I stopped smoking, um, smoked for about late teens into my early 20s. I realized I did. I just decided to I made that and changed the reward that I wanted, and so I don't smoke. You know, and I don't think she's gotten back to that change. Like you say, every day is a it's hard for you to resist that urge to smoke while you're driving because of the routineness and the habit and the feeling it gives you of relief. I also think it goes back to some control. I like to have things under my control and everything like that. So if I find routines and stuff to help keep things in that control range I have, that brings me the relief. And I think that might be something else that is a issue and to look at. Um, and he says down here, cues are meaningless until they are interpreted. Thoughts, feelings, and emotions are the observer what transform a cue into a craving. The third step is response. The response is the actual habit you perform, which can take the form of a thought or an action. Whether a response occurs depends on how motivated you are and how much friction is associated with the behavior. If a particular action requires more physical or mental effort than you're willing to expend, then you won't do it, and therefore you won't develop that habit. And a lot of times I find myself, I'll say, okay, this week I want to buy some decent groceries like some pork chops and hamburger and maybe some chicken to come home and make some good decent meals. But half the time when I get to that stage and I get home, I feel so tired and worn up from my day, from all the stresses and things and I'm thinking I don't want to do much more work. I just want to come home, find something quick, easy. I want to sit down, I want to relax, I want to chill. And half the time I don't attain the desired result that I want. And so, you know, to me, it's more work and more effort to me to do what I'm doing, chilling and stuff, rather than to do the reward of trying to change my eating habits to eat better and to work towards being healthier, maybe having more energy. So that way, when I come home, I'll still have the energy to do the things. And if I built and worked on that habit, it would become that habit then. And Um, have you ever felt that way at times, Catherine, where you just, you in your head, you say, I want to make these changes, but when you get there and trying to initiate the process, sometimes it's harder to get started than you realized?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I don't understand, why I don't do them because I know that they're things that are important to me and they're they're like I have so many friends that I want to reach out to and connect with. I just don't have the energy. By the time I get home, I'm exhausted. I had to actually, because I don't have the energy to make a decent meal when I get home, I had to change my habits and start drinking something that gives me all the nutrition I need. I drink it as my breakfast and lunch, and that way, whether I eat at night or not, it doesn't matter. At least I've got my nutrition in for the day. And but I have family that I don't reach out to. I have friends I don't reach out to. I have activities that I enjoy that I don't do um, because I'm too tired. And thankfully, most of the time I'm at least able to. Well, I don't eat. I'm vegan, so there's a lot of things that I don't eat. But there's things that I avoid. Um, there's a lot of fast food I can't eat, so it's easy for me to avoid that trap because I just don't eat those foods. But I know how easy it is. I see a lot of the Uber drivers in town and stuff, constantly eating fast food. I have put on some weight since I've been driving because I'm just so sedentary. I'm just sitting all day. And I have to, I've been able to make the dietary changes successfully, but I have to develop the habit of stopping and walking at least once a day or something. I've got to incorporate more activity to be able to, because I don't really eat enough to be gaining weight, so it's simply lack of activity. And I have to develop a different habit around that because it's very uncomfortable. Even if I have an extra 5 pounds on my frame, it's just really uncomfortable because of my back and stuff. And um, but those habits are like, it's really easy for me to work all the time. Working is a habit that I developed at a very early age. I was working 2 jobs when I was 11 years old, and working is a habit that came easy to me and is something that I can execute very, very well. Um, but working in all of life around work, I'm not as successful at. Like, there's all these amazing activities out here in Colorado that I would love to do and, go have fun. Um, but I don't do those things. And we have tons of places where I could go do yoga or Tai Chi or something like that. I don't even sign up because I know I won't go. There's a chance that I can develop the habit of using a video at home. I have more of a chance of doing that than I do if I go to a class. And I know some people say, well, if I pay for the class and I've put out money for it, then that makes me go. That doesn't make me go. That does not work for me. Like, I've had gym memberships before. I go for a little bit and then I just don't go anymore. Um, but if I find something, and part of the reason for that sometimes is that I overdo it. I have a tendency to overdo it, and then I injure myself, and then I have to take time off, and then by the time I get healthy enough to do it again, I'm just doing something else. So I do love to dance. So I think dancing is a great exercise for me. Um, my dog's getting older. I don't walk her as much anymore, although I'm sure she would enjoy getting out and taking that walk. And I think the way that we frame things in our mind, it's all about our mind, you guys. Like everything, every book we've ever read, all of our suffering is all about what we say to ourselves. Pretty much the lies that we tell ourselves. Going back to Byron Katie, um, you have to frame it in your mind where it's a good thing and you're going to enjoy it, because to try to make yourself do something that you don't enjoy is just an uphill battle. If you can find some way to frame it or to alter it, so and make, and I don't know if that's just because I'm a blue personality and I like to have fun, but when I have something that I have to do, I have to frame it in my mind in a way that it's a game or something. It's just something, that some little twist that I have to make to make it enjoyable, or I just won't do it. Like, I mean, I'm honest enough to say I just won't do it. And but if I can, like the dancing, if I can, I've got music that I absolutely love, and if I can put that music on, and even if I just dance to one song a day, then that'll be something. That'll be some activity. And I think each one of us, you're right. Some of our habits are totally developed by our parents. Uh, whether if they're a make a bed person or not a make a bed person, or if they taught you to brush your teeth. Some parents don't teach their children to brush their teeth. So, some habits are totally like how you were raised. And then to further complicate things with our mind, I'm also reading a book about PTSD, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And it talks about how people who have suffered traumatic events, it actually changes their brain and its ability to think and rationalize and form habits, I would say. And it also sets us in a motion where certain things trigger. You could call it a habit, I guess. It triggers a response. It's sort of like a learned habit, but it's learned through trauma. And so, like for me, if someone raises their voice, I immediately, withdraw. Like that's frightening because I know what comes after that. And so you tend to respond or react in a certain way just instantaneously. There's no thought process involved. It's just a survival mechanism that kicks in. And so, that if you've had some sort of trauma in your life, that can definitely interfere with your ability to alter some habits. Um, because you may have developed a habit that you have convinced yourself is keeping you safe or something, or keeping you in control, or it's doing something, but it all came from that trauma that you experienced. And I think habits developed around trauma are a lot harder to change because they're just so they're automatic. Like we don't we just, like, your heart just jumps up to 250 beats per minute, and and there's nothing you can do about it, and then there's things that you do to kind of de-escalate yourself from that. Now that could be, eating something unhealthy, some sort of comfort food, or smoking, or drinking. And I think it's fascinating, and sad on many levels. Uh, and maybe it's just because I'm not a drinker and I've never been a drinker. My body doesn't tolerate it. That I almost everybody that gets in my car is a drinker. Like, I'm amazed at how many people at the end of the day use alcohol to relieve their stress. And it can it can lead to some very it can lead to some serious health issues. It can lead to, some bad financial decisions. One of our panel members here, Sandy, has been very forthright about her battle with alcohol in the past, and all the things that she had to do to change her life around those habits. And it's, again, it's another habit. It's a stress reliever. It's a way to escape from harsh realities sometimes. And nobody intends to become an alcoholic or a drug addict or a whatever. It's just something that relieves stress in the moment. And then that felt good. And then you're back to those triggers that you just read, Dan. That cue, the stress comes up and it's like, okay, this doesn't feel good. How do I relieve this? So if we can develop better habits, and I would say the first one needs to be when stress pops up for us. And I'm talking to myself here, guys. When stress pops up for us, I think our first habit needs to be to examine the stress and examine what we're telling ourselves about the stress, because it may be something as simple as just reframing that in our mind, realizing that we're actually lying to ourselves about whatever it is, and that's what's causing the stress. Um, Sometimes you can totally relieve stress just by realizing you're lying to yourself about it, because you say something in your head like, oh my God, this is never going to end. This is going on forever and ever. Well, is that really true? No. Like, it's probably not true. It probably is going to end. So we can build up a whole lot of kind of like fake stress or self induced stress, I would say, just by not being truthful with ourselves about certain situations. If it is a stress that's just there and we're not lying to ourselves about it, we just have to deal with it, then obviously it's better if we can develop stress relieving habits that are healthier as opposed to non-healthier. I kind of make fun about all of our joggers here because we'll have joggers out at, it's like 2 degrees outside and a blizzard, and our joggers are out jogging here in Boulder, Colorado. And I kind of laugh at them and call them endorphin addicts. But I mean, I have to give them credit. Like they're maintaining their habit regardless of the weather, which is something that most people don't do. Um, a lot of people, they may have the habit of jogging, but if the weather's bad, they go, oh, well, another day. Um, so if we can find ways to um, relieve that stress that isn't causing more stress on our bodies, like the eating, causes more stress, then we start getting fat, then we don't feel good, then we're unhappy with our bodies. So we basically just try to relieve stress by putting more stress in a different area. So all these things, but if it's been ingrained, like, and this is something I saw as a nurse, and I still see it actually, even as an Uber driver. Um, Parents have a tendency to relieve children's stress with food. Like a kid will be upset, they'll be crying, and they'll be like, oh, here, have this something to eat, or have this candy, or let's go get an ice cream, or, like it. And that habit, that eating to relieve stress, I think, um, you see kids in the stores, they're throwing a fit, they want this toy or whatever, and maybe if the parent has enough strength, they'll stand up to the temper tantrum over the toy, but then almost always they wind up placating them with something else, like a little candy or a cookie, or oh, let's go to McDonald's, or let's do this, and we really teach our kids bad habits. I, but we don't want to see our kids hurting. And it's difficult to, once those are, ingrained from childhood, I think those habits are really hard to change. And then we have these habits, we call them holidays, where we have these days where we just do nothing but gorge ourselves with food, like Thanksgiving, you know, and some of those habits are hard to change too, because you think, well, it's only one day. And so sometimes we kind of we don't fess up to the reality of the situation. We kind of lie to ourselves a little bit about things and allow bad habits to continue that way.
I was gonna jump in here and say, okay, from there, like we went over the cue, the craving, and then the next step is the reward. And there's always a reward that we want or desire. Like you say, you wanted to make certain change. I want to make some certain changes, um, and from there, then after that, we have the response, and the response is actually what comes out of going through the first three steps. The response is the habit usually is formed, and then once we keep building on that, that's how we build the habit. But I wanted to go back to a little bit of what you were saying, because there is, I'm like you, I have been the victim of some, physical and mental abuse at the hands of my parents and stuff, and I have triggers that as I've gotten older, I'm starting to learn and recognize some of those triggers, especially in confrontations, where when I tend to do certain things, and I don't like confrontations in the first sense, but if I'm pushed to my limits, I will react, and I react in a very not the way you would think I would react. I have one instance where I won't go through the whole thing, but the basic thing is at some point, um, I've been thrown against a wall by my stepdad, and I literally landed horizontally on my wall from where my door was over to where my bed was on the other side of the room, and slid down the wall and landed on my bed, and then leaped literally off my bed. I didn't even land on the floor. I landed from my bed in his arms and bit him on the chest because I was so in that moment and so responsive to the pain and the hurt and what happened. That's how I lashed out. Now, I learned that one part about me at that very young age. I was like 7, 8, or 9, right? When that happened, that if I'm pushed to that point, I will not care. I will not what damage I do. I will not care what happens. What the end result is, I'm going to inflict the most worst pain I can ever inflict on somebody to help you understand what you just did to me. I've learned that I have a horrible temper when it really comes down to it. So I've learned how to, kind of squash that. But in squashing it, I have developed other habits that I don't like in order to take care of that stress, but yet to still maintain control. And some of those habits I don't like. And that's something, that this book is helping me to receive and understand that I developed responses, and it was more of a survival response like you were talking about. But I don't like that side of me ever, and thank God it has never reared its ugly head ever again. But I immediately try to get out of those types of situations almost immediately. But again, that's a response to something very bad and very, very painful. I think there are a lot of things that do come out of those type of instances, and they happen far more often in life than anybody ever wants to admit or address. But they are part, I think, of us also as we're going through and we're coming up against challenges, and we say, "Oh, is that worth it to deal with, or is that not worth it to deal with?" And I think we make a lot of those decisions based on those really deep, dark, down, underlying things we've been through in order to move out and into finally getting to being the best person that we want to be and for ourselves. And so I think in reading, this chapter especially, I'm learning more of how these things are developed, the habits are developed, and it's given me a tool now to where I can say, hey, oh, this is what I'm dealing with, this is what I'm looking at. And he talks about in the book, there are two, with these 4 steps, but there are two main phases. There's the problem phase and there's the solution phase. Well, if you can learn to understand what's going on in the problem phase and what outcome you can then, I think, direct the outcome you want in the solution phase, and you can make it either a good um, you know, response and habit, or you can make it a bad habit. And I think that goes back to some of what you were saying. Um, if we're a parent, or we are have, you know, especially parents, you have kids and they're little, and if you learn some of the things that you hated being done to you as a parent, but yet you're starting to do those same things because those things tend to get handed down. And sometimes you hear about families breaking, the cycle of certain things like abuse or alcoholism or this or that or the other thing. And if you can learn to understand those things through, you know, our habits and how they developed and how they get handed down, you can change things for yourself, but you can also change it for generations to come within your family too. And that's another thing that I think is to look at is he says that all behavior is driven by the desire to solve a problem. And I think I believe that. There are so many things in my mind that I'm like, okay, I want to change this issue, this problem. I want to go from, not eating as good as I want, or maybe becoming more active, like you were saying, working full time at a regular full time job, and then going and doing Uber part time. Then when I come home, a lot of times all I want to do is just sit and chill. But then I say, oh well, I still have a house to clean. I still have this to do. And then I'm thinking, oh, it's my house. If you know, if it's not bothering me, but yet I have a roommate and his daughter there. I have to think of them. I have to, and there are things that you play off, and you sometimes weigh, and I'll say you weigh the consequences. And if it's not, like I said, it goes back to what he says. If it's not a desired outcome, you're not going to do it. But if you reframe, and I think that's the best way of, how you put it is reframing it in your mind to how you approach it, you can get better results and you can move forward then to start working on doing the changing the cravings to get to the right responses to change the habit to becoming the habit that you want. And I don't know. I hope you feel the same way I do. It's given me tools to work with that are very basic and simple tools. Now it's just taking that and implementing it and changing it and make the thoughts. And but then how do I make those changes and how do I actively get them to be there so I can get there? So does that mean I set little reminders? Do um, I have a uh, app or program I can use? It's called Habit Forge, and I can set reminders, and it sends me little texts and stuff. Did you do this today? Have you done that today? And I loved it, and I was doing it a lot of times when I was doing my blogging to make sure I stayed on track with doing my blogging and this and that. And I've got out of that habit because things happen and life happens, and I let certain habits take over rather than continuing those same habits. And so I'm wondering, have you thought of things that you maybe might be able to do now to change and reframe some of your thoughts and your processes to obtain some of the desires that you want, Catherine?
Yeah, I reframe things all the time. And because I'll catch myself lying to myself about certain situations. And, I'll be stressed out. And then I'm like, well, why am I so stressed out? And I start looking at what am I saying to myself about that situation. And then I realize that it's not true or it's just out of my control. Some things are just out of your control and you just have to deal with it. And I think those are the situations where you just have to reframe it to something that you can go along with, basically, something that gets you through it. And because I think all of us have horrible tempers, man. All of us do. All of us are driven to survive. And when we feel threatened, we can just turn into that wild feral cat or whatever, that's um, just wants to survive and is just going to hurt whoever they need to hurt because they've been hurt. And we don't like that. Most of us don't like that part. There are some people that are really proud at how savage they can be, but many of us, we're taught that that's inappropriate behavior, that it hurts people, blah, 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 blah. And so what the majority of us do is we bury those impulses. Like somebody will piss us off and we have this thought comes up, oh, well, I'd like to just smack them or whatever. You're thinking, I don't know what you're thinking, but this thought comes up and then you go, oh no, that wouldn't be nice. And then you stuff it. And I'm going to tell you, because I've been helping people with cancer for decades, that shit turns into cancer. It turns into illness of all different kinds when you're stuffing those emotions. So I think one habit that is important to develop is a way to deal with those impulses without necessarily stuffing them. Like we need to learn, and I'm talking to myself here, we need to learn to use our words and let people know when they're being inappropriate, not just smacking them like we'd like to do, but we need to be able to use our words to express how we're feeling without, being inappropriate and hurting someone, but without just stuffing it so that it turns into something bad inside ourselves. And maybe we don't even say it to them in person. Maybe we just say it when we're by ourselves. Like sometimes um, I'll get, I'll be driving and, I'll have a rider in the car and maybe, I don't know, something's going on that's upsetting me, but I have to maintain a very calm exterior for my rider. But then once they get out, like sometimes I'll just cuss or I'll just yell or I'll just do something to kind of like blow off steam, and get it out of my system so that it's not just in there sitting and building. And because when you do start stuffing emotions, they don't really go anywhere. Like they just they stay in there, they get worse. You start lying to yourself about stuff. And every person that I have helped with cancer, when I asked them, what was going on in their life around that time, there's always some huge emotional upset. I mean, it's almost always a heartbreak or something like that, or just a super, super stressful situation where they felt helpless. Or, and sometimes they don't make the connection, but once you can acknowledge that that's where that comes from, some of those diseases start going away. Like we are the most incredible. I don't know what we are. Like sometimes I think we're machines. Sometimes I don't know because our brains, the capacity that they work at, the amount of information that our brains process and store, and the amount of information that each cell of our body stores, and cellular memory, like it's just mind blowing. Um, and we don't make certain connections. That's why reading these books and talking about these books is so important because it helps us make connections that we wouldn't have made before. It helps us look at things and say, oh, now I see where that came from. Now I remember where that came from. And once it's like they say with an addict, the first step is acknowledgement. And all of us are addicts, even to our own thoughts at some point. And so once we can actually acknowledge that connection, that's when we can start taking the actions to change the habits to bring about the resolution. But until we make that connection and we don't understand what's causing it, how can we change it?
I love that. I love how you said that we are all addicts to our thoughts, which when you really think about it, we actually are. And it goes back to like when we were studying the book, what to say to yourself when you talk to yourself. Those words and those things can really, have an effect. And it goes back into the habits and the things that we do. And to kind of come back around and to summarize the chapters, we're getting towards the top of the hour. He talks about the four laws of behavioral change, and he talks about in the following chapters. We'll see time and again how the four stages: cue, craving, response, reward. Excuse me. Reward influence nearly everything we do each day. But before we do that, we need to transform those four steps into a practical framework that we can use to design good habits and eliminate bad ones. And he says this framework has the four laws of behavioral change, and it provides simple rules for creating the good and breaking the bad habit. Um, when you think of each law as a lever that influences human behavior, when the levers are in the right position, creating good habits is effortless. When they are in the wrong position, it is nearly impossible. And he says the first law is pertaining to and the first one pertains to Q. It says make it obvious. So making what we want and what we're looking for, and the Q, that is the thing we are out there looking for to help start the process of building the habit. Then the second law, craving, make it attractive. And it goes back to, like you said, the reframing of how we look at it and how we put it in our head before we even start the process of the habit. So therefore, we're on the right step and the right process of forming the right good habit we want, not just saying, "Oh, okay, make it attractive," but we don't put enough time and energy into it. We just kind of, okay, whatever, to get to the next step to maybe get to the desired result. But are we really getting to that full desired result we want? The third law of response, make it easy. If it's not something that we can do, and he talks about it has to be something we can do, um, we're not going to ultimately follow through to make that habit the way we want it. And yes, there are some habits that just seem to have it and come up, and then later on, after we develop, we're like, wait a minute, that was not the result I wanted. That's not what I wanted out of it. Like developing some good eating habits or things like that, or not smoking or not drinking or things like that. And then the fourth law, reward, make it satisfying. And a lot of times we develop habits that are satisfying, but are they really, again, goes back to what is our original desire and reasoning why we wanted to achieve what we're getting. And then he says, and we can invert these laws to learn how to break a bad habit. This is what I thought was really helpful for me to help work on changing some of the bad habits I want. Inversion of the first law, make it invisible. So if we change that cue from being visible to where it's something we're wanting to work towards or that is attractive and we want to try and see where it leads, make it invisible. Don't even bring it in the horizon to where you see it. So therefore it never comes up. So you never respond to that and do that bad habit. Inversion of the second law, craving, make it unattractive. So if we can make it invisible and turn around and make it unattractive, therefore, again, you're just circumventing and cutting off that line to that habit to get to that bad result that we've developed. Inversion of the third law, response, make it difficult. In order to make the habit, be formed, it needs to be something that can be done and doable and that you want to do. But if you are trying to break the bad habit, make it difficult. Put things in your way or develop systems of somebody that's accountable that can help look at you and say, are you doing what you say you're doing? Something to help put out there to where you don't ultimately want to do that habit anymore. And then the last one, the version of the fourth law, reward, make it unsatisfying. If you find ways of how to make that bad habit undesirable and unsatisfying, more than likely you'll get to the point where you won't ever do that bad habit again unless something really stressful comes along. Like, and I'm not saying it can't happen because I saw my mom who smoked for a lot of years, then quit for 17 years, and then started up again. You even spoke about it yourself in some of the things you done. I have things that I started you be irresponsible for me to claim that these four laws are an exhaustive framework for changing any human behavior. But he says he thinks they're close. And I think he's right. I think it's a good framework and a good way to build and build good habits if you use them the right way in building the habits. And if you want to break habits by inverting them and doing the things in the opposite steps to help break bad habits. So, and going back to what you said kind of earlier, it says if you've ever wondered why don't I something that never seemed to me, the answers to these questions can be found somewhere in these four laws. And I think that right here is a lot of the key to starting the stepping stones for building the things that you want out of your life and the habits that you want to work towards and breaking the ones that you don't, and you know and start on that road to where you want to be. So Any last thoughts from you, Catherine?
Well, I really I loved what he said about you can develop habits to become anything or anyone that you want to be. And one of the points that was brought out is about being a musician. Um, I have a cello that I was guided to purchase this cello. I started playing and then my teacher moved away and finances became tighter and I never got another teacher, but I always like I love the cello, I want to play the cello, and yet I never pick up the cello. The cello sits there getting dust. Well, the other day a writer got in and heard the music I was listening to and he said, "Are you a musician? Because I've never heard anybody listen to music like this before." And when he asked me, "Are you a musician?" I immediately said, "No." So when I read that in this chapter, when I heard it, since I have the Audible, um, I'm like, well, no wonder I'm not picking up the cello. I don't see myself as a musician. And so I need to develop habits. You know, I can develop habits to change that. And I think that's the important thing is whatever you want to do, whoever you want to be. And sometimes that's hard to figure out. And it's okay. And just because you decide that you want to be something doesn't mean you can't change that later. It's not like you're locked into it for the rest of your life. So, but if you're not something that you want to be, you can decide to be that thing. But you need to claim it. You need to claim that you're a musician, or you need to claim that you're a non smoker, or you need to claim that you're athletic, and then you have to watch what you say to yourself and what you think about, because I'm telling you, I watch it play out in my life every day. Just yesterday, like for the past probably 4 or 5 days ago, I pulled up I pull up the Google News in the morning just because I don't watch news on TV or anything. I have to have some idea what's going on in the world. And I see this thing about Elon Musk is going to put 1 million AI cars on the road next year to compete with Uber and Lyft. And ever since I saw that article 4 or 5 days ago, I have said to myself, and I have said to several passengers, AI will never work in the town that I live in because we have these bicycles that come flying around corners doing 30 mile an hour, go right in front of you. There's no way AI can react that fast. Well, guess what happened yesterday? Going down the road after 4 or 5 days of saying this. I'm going down the road. I got a rider in the car who just, God is so funny to me. That my rider happened to be uh, an aerospace engineer, like somebody that would actually know about AI. So I'm going down the road. Here comes this bicycle out of nowhere. I reacted so quickly. I was able to avoid the accident. But I said to the guy, I said, see, that's why self-driving cars will never work in Boulder. And he said, you're right. AI could not have responded as quickly as you did. They would have run that person over. So be careful what you think about and what you say, because it will manifest into your experience. And if you're a worrier, if you're out there worrying about things, then your focus is on what you don't want to happen. So you have to change that habit. Worrying is a habit, and you have to change that habit. Um, I'm not saying it's easy, but as Dan just pointed out, there are 4 simple steps, and you can get this book and read this chapter and get those steps and learn how to invert those steps to change the habits that are not serving you. Have a great week. Thanks for being here, Dan.
Thank you for being here and helping support me being the host this week. Because um, I'm going to be honest, it's not as easy as some people think it is, and I love doing it. But sometimes I like it better when Samantha's there, and I can just chime in whenever I want. But I love the challenge, and that's one of the things you got to tell yourself. You got to make that decision to say, "Hey, I can do it," and step in and do it, and build that habit. So that way, each time it gets easier and better. And I'm with you. I think I'm not looking forward to AI on anything because, as I keep hearing about this, that, and the artificial, and I keep thinking of the movie Wally. Every time I watch Wally, I get reminded we are fast approaching becoming a world that's going to be like Wally, where we're sitting on our, and I'm going to say it this way, our fat asses, these big blobs, not doing anything, attached to our screens like we already are, and we're already headed there, and we weren't meant to be that way. We weren't. We need engagement. We need to be involved in other people's lives and interact with each other, and we also need to be active. So um, this book has helped me, realize that. But there are good things to work towards and good habits to work on developing, and there are bad habits that we all see and like in ourselves. But um, if you learn the tools and learn the things that for moving forward, such as this book, as I've shown like 2 or 3 times, um, you can find out those things and learn those things and start living the best life that you want to live. So with that, thanks for being here. Look forward to seeing you here. And as always, if you want to find out more, click on the links below the video, or go to our Facebook page, um, Mindset Mastery Collective, and join the conversation there. Or find the video on YouTube under Mindset Mastery Collective and watch it. And if you want to join our group, like I said, go over to Facebook page and request to be a part of the group. And we'd love to have you be with us and join us. I'm trying to end it, and I